Well, normally, Matt, I'd sort of say, how's things been? But I can almost guess what your answer is going to be. But let's do it anyway. How's your week?
Rainbows and butterflies, man. Trump's Washington is literally just like sleeping on a cloud. Like there's nothing happening here, no news, like nothing to be upset about. Like every American ally is happy. China and Russia are like, hey, we really want to do work with you. You guys are amazing, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, like we could talk literally completely outside of the UAP subject on the tariffs and everything that's been going on, but we won't. We'll leave that for that other kind of podcasts and stuff. But you've been doing some great work as always with Ask a Poll on the UAP front. I'd like to start off with kind of what I think is your latest, which is the Representative Jim Himes made some pretty interesting comments, specifically a comment about Air Force UAP programs. But tell us about like that uh, conversation that you had with him, that interaction. Tell us about it.
Well, so this is, I gotta like actually take a step back just because I've covered Jim Himes. You know, he's the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, and was under Mike Turner. Actually, when now Senator Adam Schiff, when he was kicked out of the role as the top Democrat on that committee because they just Republicans came in. Speaker Johnson kicked Adam Schiff, who's now a U.S. Senator, kicked him off the committee because of political BS or whatever. Then Himes got propelled to be the top Democrat. Well, since then, and like I've known Jim Himes, I've covered him for local Connecticut NPR stations for what, 15 years ago is where I knew him from. Covered him for that, like during the Newtown shooting, and the aftermath of that, all the babies who died in Sandy Hook. Jim Himes, that was Connecticut, and I covered that for them. So like I've wept with Connecticut families. And so this is where I know Himes. He knows me, which is where it's peculiar in the beginning. He calls me out and like, wait, you listen to NPR? I'm like, bro, that's how I know you. Before I grew out my bangs. So like Himes, I just know him. He knows me. I can't tell, and I'm fishing around on this. We are at Ask a Poll. I can't tell whether it was under Mike Turner. There was just like, it feels like there was this blanket kind of unspoken rule, or maybe spoken rule, but it's Intel committee, so they don't talk much. But it just seems like Turner kind of killed, or put a wet blanket on any discussion of UAPs. Because throughout the past year, because I know Himes, I think we've interviewed him. We've had like 8 or 9 exclusives with him. So he's like one of the top members of Congress that we've had on, not because he's like on the UAP caucus. Like, in fact, I keep going back to him because he shits on the topic so much. And that's just interesting to me, especially because he's the top Democrat on the House Intel Committee, or HIPSCI, House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. That's a powerful committee. And so it just kind of blew my mind for the past year that, oh, he was just saying, or pardon me, for the past Congress, for the past 2 years, that he was saying, like, no, Intel Committee's not looking into UAPs at all. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, oh, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer at the time, like, had his UAPDA, his UAP Disclosure Act amendment, gutted behind the scenes during the National Defense Authorization, or NDAA talks. And I would always go up to Himes and be like, hey, you're one of the few people allowed in that room. Was it you or Turner who gutted Schumer's UAPDA? And Himes would be like, no, it never came up. And so that always made me intrigued, like, okay, Himes, I don't think he's lying to my face, but it turns out he might have. But I'm like, Himes, what is he, like, he always would just be like, no, we're not. I was so curious because Himes has been convinced by Arrow that, hey, anything flying above US skies, like, they know what it is, even though that's not what Arrow says. Arrow says there's still a lot of stuff they don't know what it is, but Himes and others focus on the 500 or 600 items that they're like, yeah, we solved this. We know what this thing was. Well, yeah, no one's asking about that we know. Everyone's asking about what we don't know. And so Himes, yeah, he was just always cagey. Well, now that Mike Turner's been pushed out of Intel, when I go up to Himes last week, he literally blew my head off because he's like, hey, we know about UAPs. He's like, I personally looked into David Grush and his claims, which I think is a little bit of a stretch on his part. I think he's looked into what Arrow has told him about whistleblower David Grush's claims. But it was literally just night and day. Himes, a month ago, 3 months ago, in January and December, was saying, what do you mean UAPs? Well, now he's saying, no, I've looked into this. He told us at Ask a Poll, he's like, hey, I like feel the pressure. He's like, your audience at askapol.com, Ask a Poll UAPs, he's like, they're always up in my DM. So like, he's aware, but he wasn't telling us that in December. So I don't know if this is like a new post Mike Turner era, or if maybe the New Jersey drone incursions got him more at the table. Yeah, I'm just very intrigued, but he's now on our radar. So, Mr. Himes, you're coming on a live session with me. You don't know it yet, but it's going to happen.
That'd be amazing. I mean, it is strange because if throughout the past few years when we've had, hearings or things happening on the Hill, he has been very quiet. So it was really surprising to me to see that he was commenting. But he mentioned that Air Force comment, that something about Air Force programs. What did that feel like when he said it and how he phrased it?
I was so freaking confused. And like, this is one of like the beautiful things about me as a reporter. Like my first tattoo is tabula rasa, blank slate. Then I got my First Amendment. This is my quill that wrote the First Amendment on this arm. So like, these are reminders to me that, hey, objectivity doesn't exist, at least here on Earth. And so I'm limited and I need to like always keep an open mind. And that's where a lot of times I'm asking questions that I'm just inquisitive about. Actually, half the time with Ask a Poll, I'm just passing on our subscribers' questions and just asking those questions straight to the lawmakers. But so Hines, he kind of let loose, and I want to look up exactly, and it's right here, what he said, but it was so curious because he said, just here's exact quote. He said, for example, the Air Force has programs and others have programs that contemplate the possibility that there could be anomalous materials or whatever. To date, I have seen no evidence that any of these programs actually have any evidence whatsoever of any UAP, unusual materials, unusual life forms, etc. But wait. So wait, we have programs, and I guess this would be what David Grush testified in front of Congress back in 2023. What he would say are SAPs, select or special access programs that are kind of hidden from Congress. This is interesting because Himes is like, well, no. We didn't in December. We like know of these programs looking into the possibility of, UAPs or other life forms and materials. And it's like, wait. Why do we have that program or others? Like, if there's no there, then maybe we have one program that's just like, yeah, we're the Department of Nothing there. But for him to say the government has numerous programs like this, like, why would we have numerous programs investigating nothing? And so it just, I don't have an answer for that. And I wish the UAP caucus was still investigating this issue as hardcore as they've been investigating the JFK assassination, etc., the Epstein stuff. Yeah, I mean, because right now, what we're hearing at the start of this, it's still early in Trump's administration, but this is also the start of the new Congress, the 119th Congress. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. All you guys on the UAP caucus, you had no, at least public, line, no connection with the House Intelligence Committee. And a lot of the UAP caucus folks are newer members of Congress, so they don't have the seniority where they're going to be put on intel, etc. And so, well, hey guys, you now have a direct line. And so it was actually us at Ask a Poll who alerted Congressman Himes, ranking member Himes, that David Grush has now been hired by Eric Burleson, Republican congressman from Missouri. So it's like, hey guys, Himes was very intrigued hearing that Grush had been hired, and he was asking me like, oh, who? And so I was like, all right. And then I told Burleson like, hey, Himes is intrigued by you hiring Grush. Burleson, he's newish to Congress, I think second, maybe third term. So he doesn't know Himes. Himes is a Democrat. They're evil. They're on the other side of the chamber. And so like half of what us political reporters do is like accidental matchmaking. Because I'm like, you all should talk.
I mean, it does seem like it's been pretty bipartisan for a few years now. So it does surprise me when people still aren't that connected in certain ways when it comes to UAP. But let's just touch upon that thing about Burleson hiring Grush, because at first it sounded, and I think there was a couple of tweets, and I forget, it might be Anna Paulina Luna, but that said that he was going to be a staffer and help more with the task force. But in truth, it's actually he's just been hired by Burleson individually. Could you break that down for us?
Yeah. And so this is where Congress, as I always tell people, I've been covering Congress about 2 decades now, 19 years. So Washington, yeah, it's fair to call us the swamp. Within that swamp, you have this separate universe called the White House. Then down the street from the White House, there's this completely other universe called Congress. Within that other universe, you have 2 different solar systems that are key. One is the US Senate and one is the House. And like, they do not communicate. They are literally in other universes from each other, even if they do work out of the same building, basically. And so with Grush, and remember, he was the big whistleblower at the start of 2023. House Oversight Committee had David Grush in for Public Oversight Committee. There was a line that wrapped around like 3 or 4 corridors in the U.S. Capitol in the Rayburn House Office Building, which is like the oldest, biggest House Office building. I've been covering Congress for 19 years. Like I was there during the MLB, the Major League Baseball steroid scandal. There were more reporters and more, like 5 times as many members of the public outside of that David Grush UAP public hearing than there were outside of like the Major League Baseball one. And like people weren't lining up. Well, some might have wanted Grush's autograph, but like McGuire, Sosa, like everyone lines up, blocks for their autographs. And it was just fascinating seeing like, wait, this is different. And so Grush testifies. Ryan Graves, I forget.
David Fravor.
Yep. So they testify, and about half, I haven't actually tallied it up, but it was the only frustrating thing for lawmakers in there was that about half of Grush's testimony was, hey, I have an answer for your question. I just can't say it publicly because I had a security clearance and that's classified information. So I can answer your questions in a SCIF, one of these secured, compartmentalized information facilities that are, classified and totally, lawmakers aren't allowed to bring phones in there, ... Well, so lawmakers since that for 2 years now have been trying to get Grush back in a SCIF. Well, some people in the community say like they haven't tried very hard, but they would say that they've tried the UAP caucus and they just have been given the runaround whether it's Arrow, whether it's DOD. Well, so Congressman Eric Burleson, his kind of workaround for that was like, hey, we should hire Grush. And so all that to say, because this new task force within, like underneath the House Oversight Committee, it's a task force. So that means one, and this is something new I learned this year, a task force only has a 6-month lifespan. It can be extended, and it can surely be shortened, if leaders get pissed off. But like, it's got a 6-month mandate. It doesn't have, because it's that temporary, supposed to be precise investigation, they don't have their own budget. And so the UAP task force, in this case, is underneath the House Oversight Committee. So if they want to subpoena someone, they have to go to Chair James Comer and get his permission. If they wanted, which they did, their own funds, etc., they have to get that approved by Chair Comer, and I think it would actually come out of his budget. And so that's where, once they got the task force, Burleson, wanted the task force to hire Grush, but it just became like, wait, we don't have our own budget. And so he just hired him as a part-time staffer under his, in his congressional office. So like each lawmaker has like a certain amount of money that they can allocate, each year for their offices. It's interesting because Burleson told me, and I didn't know this, that he can't really share a staffer. The rules are like, all right, if you work for Congressman Burleson, you also can't be working for Congresswoman Luna, etc. And so Grush is now working for Burleson, but he's working on the UAP investigation. And so it seems almost like Burleson, and again, this is new, so we don't quite know, but it feels like Burleson is going to kind of be the go-between. And he says, like, Congresswoman Luna, who's now the chair of this secrets task force, many Democrats call it this conspiracy task force, because, again, they're not just looking into UAPs. They're looking into the JFK and MLK assassinations, Jeffrey motherfucking piece of shit Epstein and his shit. Then I think 9/11 and the origins of COVID. Again, 6-month window to investigate kind of every secret / conspiracy under the sun. So like the clock is very much ticking for them. But this is where Burleson seems to be doing something interesting, because Grush, and I guess he was just hired, I believe Monday or Tuesday, whenever April 1st was when he was officially onboarded. So now, even though many in the community are going to be frustrated, it seems like we're not going to have another public UAP hearing for another couple months, at a minimum, it seems, because now at the end of this month, I believe, or maybe at the start of May. No. Luna told me some point during April, they're bringing in, and they say it's already scheduled, but they're bringing in Grush, Lou Elizondo, who testified in front of the Oversight Committee in 2024, last year, I think right after the election. So they're bringing in, they want Grush, Elizondo, and then Arrow in the same skiff. So classified setting, because, and this is interesting, we'll see how this pans out, but they want to literally just like shine a mirror into Arrow, because Arrow is like very opaque, new, and a lot of people feel like Arrow is investigating not the actual questions that many people have. Arrow will go into the skiff briefings and they'll like come with all this material, and the UAP caucus members come out and they're like, their material had nothing to do with the obvious questions that they knew we were going to ask. So there's just been this frustration. So they're kind of like dealing a pretty heavy hand here, by kind of putting, and I'm a congressional junkie and you know, self-taught historian, for lack of a better term, read a biography on every U.S. president, just looking for how they interacted with Congress over the years. I've never really come across a whistleblower actually becoming a congressional staffer investigating the very fuckery, tomfoolery, lies, that they blew the whistle on. And so, in one sense, this really does kind of empower Grush. And so there's still a question of whether he gets his full security clearance back or not. And I guess Burleson said he's pretty sure that they sent the request to the Pentagon. Again, with these newer members of the UAP caucus, they're kind of learning stuff as they go. And yeah, I've been here 20 years. I'm learning stuff as they go too, because they're raising questions that just aren't really raised.
But does Burleson have the clearance necessary? If Grush has his clearance, to say what he wants to say freely, does Burleson have that level of clearance to receive that information?
So this is where I'm also a little confused, just because this question doesn't really come up much.
Right.
But I think it was Congresswoman Luna who might have told me that, like, every member of Congress just gets a natural security clearance. Like, they're a step above the rest of us, just like naturally, because they're in Congress. And so, like, I've seen this, like, what? After that first Chinese balloon flew from, over Montana to, before it was shot down outside of, off the coast of South Carolina, when the American public was freaking the F out because they were like, what the heck is this balloon hovering over our houses? Man, it did for it traversed the entire US. So when the American public was freaking out about that, they had a couple classified all US senator briefings. They also had similar ones in the House. So and like what, before the US starts a war in Iraq or before blah, 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 when there's like a big conflict, yeah, you have the generals and all that come and they give a classified briefing to all of Congress. Now, I'm not allowed inside those skiffs, those classified briefings, and like you can't fit all of Congress in a skiff. And so like when they're sitting in this congressional auditorium having a classified briefing, they're not getting the same level of top secret stuff that as generals would be comfortable talking about, for one, with members who like are on the intel committees, etc., or on armed forces committee. But they're also like, that's just not a setting. I don't know of a skiff that's large enough to house all 435 members of the House. And so it's natural that they can't do a top secret, if they're warning Congress or alerting Congress, like, hey, we're about to, go bomb Moscow or Baghdad or whoever. Congress needs to be looped into that, but that goes to like the tops of Congress. And so like all that long-winded BS to say each lawmaker, yes, they have a certain level of classification where, yeah, they can get more of America's secrets than Joe and Jane public can, but they're still not, and this is where Burleson, Luna, and all them come in, they're still not like the top secret classified setting. I don't believe, and this is where I'm curious because I have been pushing lawmakers, like I don't know whether they actually have to submit paperwork to the FBI and Pentagon. In this case, Burleson said he had to submit paperwork, he believes, to the Pentagon for Grush to get his clearance back. But I don't, and this is actually a great question. This is one I'll say ask a poll. We're going to circle back with Burleson on because there has been a little confusion, and I think part of that again stems from these are younger lawmakers who are being very effective, but they're also using tools that other Congresses, for the 2 decades I've been here, just haven't used. And so they're kind of learning new stuff that I think the institution itself is learning as they go. And so that's where we just don't have simple answers for any of these questions because this is uncharted territory. Um, yeah. And again, now having David Grush, the whistleblower himself, at the table, it's just something we haven't seen. And if anyone out there knows of a past, whether it was the McCarthy investigation or whatever, if you all know of any time a whistleblower was hired by Congress, let me know. Because, yeah, I haven't come across it and I read a lot.
Yeah, no, for sure. That'd be interesting. Definitely. It might help us gain some insight into what they're planning. But I think another thing that I've been pondering is, if Burleson manages to gather some intel from Grush and they clearly don't trust Arrow, how do you think Congress would then go about investigating or looking into the claims that Grush may, some of the information Grush may give to Burleson?
Well, this is, again, everything's new right now, guys. And yeah, we're 4 months in ish. Probably technically 3 months into the new Trump administration. But I think what we're seeing with a lot of the UAP caucus members, because again, this is where, before we talked about how politics hasn't really come into this issue, it started to a little bit last October, October 2024, right ahead of the election. And it was bullshit. And yeah, it was, Democratic members of the UAP caucus just lobbing some bombs because they're in the minority. Um, all of that seems to have kind of winnowed away because this is an issue that I think even lawmakers themselves really enjoy the respite from the political BS. This is one of the few nonpartisan issues. It's not one of the only ones in Congress. Well, no, cannabis, crypto. Yeah, there's a handful, but this one in particular, I think we're really seeing these members kind of figure out as they go. For one, how much power they actually have. What can they actually do? And as they go, they keep and they expect more and more for the Pentagon, Arrow, they just expect all these hurdles. And so that, if anything, in the past, that's bound Republicans and Democrats together. Because after Grush testified in the summer of 2023, we had what? Congressman Jamie Raskin, constitutional scholar. He's now the head Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. Y'all might be like, wait, Jamie Raskin, he was one of the he was the second Democrat, I believe, to lead one of the Trump impeachment trials in the last time, in the first Trump administration. So yeah, he's this rabid partisan way over here. Well, you had Raskin and AOC, who's further to the left than Pelosi and anyone else. Well, her and Raskin, so she's further to the left than him. Well, both of them came out saying yeah, we want to hear from Grush in a classified setting. Well, then when you look at these UAP caucus members, the chair and the co-chair, they're part of that far right group that some of y'all might know the name of, the Freedom Caucus, which is the furthest right you can get in the House of Representatives or in American politics, basically. And so you have the furthest ends of the spectrum. Then you have moderate Republicans, more moderate ones like Nancy Mace. They're at the table. And so, like, this whole topic has been kind of gloriously nonpartisan. Um, and so it'll be interesting, especially now the Republicans or the UAP caucus is starting to focus in a little bit more, it seems, especially with the help of Grush. Because again, like, don't let this be lost on you. Like, these members, when they left that oversight hearing with Grush in 2023 in July, since then, they've been clamoring to get Grush and, to hear him answer those questions in a classified setting. And so that's where now they're kind of playing chess, and we'll see, because with them asking for Grush, Elizondo, and Arrow in the same room is kind of them playing some really interesting five-dimensional chess, because, like, that doesn't happen. Congressional hearings are boring BS. You have everyone give like a 5-minute opening statement, and then when members question the experts, Republicans will question their expert, or sometimes they'll try to dunk by asking like the one Democratic expert their question. But you don't have the witnesses necessarily, for the most part. They're not dialoguing with each other, and they're not being asked like, hey, is that true? Is this? So, like, again, in my 20 years here, I haven't seen those dynamics. So they are not reinventing the wheel. Maybe they're like smoothing out some of the squarish parts of the wheel. And that's where, especially right now, with this little respite, even though Washington is totally inundated with, Trump politics, for lack of a better term, which has everyone freaking out, Republicans included, because Republicans kind of hate this tariff war as well. But so, yeah, you have this political skittishness, but not necessarily with the UAP issue. And so it'll be interesting. And that's kind of what I'm watching for in the coming weeks, whether they kind of band together. And I think it'll be them hearing from Grush privately and then saying, hey, we're going to make this request. And it might not just be Pentagon. It might be Department of Energy. It might be a military contractor. We don't know. But that's where we haven't totally seen the UAP caucus in particular, like, heal from the past election. Because again, you have the far right Tea Party folks and then others on the left. But it seems like they are very much primed to just like get over that political BS, because they all have the same questions, which are, what the heck is out there? What does the administration have that they're not sharing with us in Congress?
Yeah, I mean, it's really encouraging to see that almost 2 years on, they're still trying to push for the information and things. But that then leads me to think that it's only been a matter of months since we had this drone debacle, and the last thing on that was kind of the statement that these were all FAA authorized drones. Kind of nothing to see here. Do you think there'll be a push, or are there any murmurings of a push to keep that investigation going as to really what was going on there?
Well, so I think you actually just reminded me that I didn't totally answer your question from the first go round. But this is where I think we're seeing, like, members. I don't know if they totally realize the power they have when they bind together, and, like, especially in the House, because the margins have been so slim. Like, this week, Republicans got two new members of Congress elected from Florida in the House. They won those special elections. And it seems like they're very much trying, yeah, to just figure out, for one, what mechanisms they have. And I think part of that, especially when it comes to the Congresswoman Luna and Burchett's, we don't know this. We haven't confirmed it or whatever, but they have channels to the White House. And so, like Luna this week, she's, pissed Speaker Johnson off because she's pushing this, she's pushing, yeah, she did this thing called the discharge petition, which is basically a middle finger in the air to whoever's the speaker. It's like, hey, if we get half of the House to sign off on this, then even though the speaker doesn't want to have this vote, you have to hold this vote. And so she did that when it came to new mothers like herself, and she wanted proxy voting for them. Johnson and Luna are now like in just this bloody, vicious battle over this. It's interesting to me because yesterday, President Trump came out and endorsed Luna's proxy voting for preggers. I call it proxy for preggers. Proxy voting for, pregnant women or, women who just had babies and all that. And so Luna, what we learned from that is Luna does have a line to Trump in the White House. We don't know whether that's Trump's cell phone because Trump thinks she's hot or something. Like, you never know with Trump. Or whether, they're both, well, he's got Mar-a-Lago in Florida. She's a Florida congresswoman. So the Florida delegation does have a closer relationship with Trump than many others. So that's where what we don't know is, all right, how direct is that line from Luna to Trump and his administration? And did she just use her only spade card, for the proxy voting thing? Or does she have more chips that she can kind of cash in with Trump? And so that's where none of us, and it's a thread we're pulling at askapol.com, we're trying to figure out whether they actually do. I mean, because let me put it this way, just point blank, it seems like a lot of these Republicans on, especially the Freedom Caucus folks on the Congressional UAP caucus, they just have, I don't know whether it's innate, but they've been very trusting that, hey, this administration came in promising disclosure from the conversations and even from Trump's picks. Initially Matt Gaetz was a nominee, and he's been pro-disclosure. Marco Rubio, he told us David Grush was he's like, we've had whistleblowers before, but Rubio told me in 2023, he's like, hey, Grush is the first time, I believe, the Inspector General went through and said, hey, everything he says is checking out. So they forwarded it to Congress saying, hey, this is a priority and ... And so that was Marco Rubio, who used to be head of this, or top Republican on Senate Intel, saying that. And so, so he's now Secretary of State. And so the question becomes, and I think this is what UAP caucus members are dealing with, Secretary of State for America has a lot of fires to put out across the globe, especially because his boss keeps starting fires across the globe. And so, UAPs is an issue a lot of other nations are dealing with, and some have programs, etc. And so the question that I think members are dealing with is, hey, are these people, Congressman Walz, Rubio, they were our allies when they were in Congress, some tangentially, but are they our allies now? Because when you're working for a new boss, and in this case Trump, you're going to do what the boss's priorities are. You might have your side issues, and so that's where I think UAP caucus members, especially the Republicans, kind of have this innate trust that the administration wants to disclose stuff like they did on JFK, Epstein. I guess those files were kind of a dud. But that's where, when you ask Democrats about that, Democrats just I mean, the Republicans say it's Trump derangement syndrome. But like, maybe Democrats are seeing clearly, but they're literally like, wait, you guys are banking on President Trump doing something he said? You know, like, yeah, he promised to slash the government and he is, but that's a little different than opening up all the Roswell files, a little different than giving us the backstory on Blue Book, etc. And so, again, those are the dynamics. You have this kind of innate trust with Republicans, the head of the UAP caucus, and then this innate distrust from the Democrats. And I think that's where kind of everyone is like, show me, you know? And I'm eager to see what and if they show anything.
Yeah, it's really difficult to say at this point. I mean, although, we're a quarter of the way into the year and it just shows that time does go quickly. I mean, it's almost getting to that stage where a year and 2 years ago, we were starting to hear murmurings of the Schumer Rounds Amendment coming back into play. Do you think we're likely to see that a third time?
Well, so Senator Rounds did tell me, us at askapol.com, he told us 2-3 weeks ago, I asked about the UAPDA amendment, and he was like, well, so this is interesting. So this is former majority leader, current minority leader, Chuck Schumer's UAP Disclosure Act. The first year that came out, which I believe was 2023, Schumer was the main sponsor. And then what he did is he worked and he got, Gillibrand, a Democrat, and then, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand from New York. Easy one for him to get. She was the one who last year had that Senate Armed Services Committee on UAPs with Arrow and them. Well, then Schumer also got Senator Martin Heinrich, New Mexico Democrat, who's on the Intel Committee. So, just easy, boom, lock them up. Well, then Rounds, he brought in, for one, Marco Rubio, and then Senator Todd Young. So it was broadly bipartisan, 6 senators, 3 Dems, 3 Republicans, and they dropped the UAPDA Disclosure Act, which was then instantaneously gutted behind closed doors, seemingly in the House. Now, it could have been folks, because it was behind closed doors, it could have been folks in the Senate who gutted it, but it kind of seems like it came from the House. Well, since so Schumer came out and it was his bill the first year and it got gutted. So I think last year they changed strategies, and when it dropped, Senator Mike Rounds, the lead Republican sponsor, the lead Republican co-sponsor, became the lead sponsor of the bill last Congress. And so when I asked Rounds about that, like, hey, is it going to come up this year? He's like, basically told us at Askapol, like, I haven't talked to Schumer about it. Like, he didn't say that point blank, but he's basically like, I don't know if Schumer's going to introduce our bill again, but he's like, I'm gonna. And when the NDAA or National Defense Authorization Act talks heat up, which is usually September, October, throughout the year, lawmakers are working on that. And so, like, National Defense Authorization Act, that's a lot of big, multi-syllable words. What does it mean? Like, our U.S. military each year has to be authorized by Congress. We're not a kingdom. Congress is technically in the driver's seat. And so each year they have to pass this bill. Like, this is not funding the military at the nearly $1 trillion a year they get. That's a separate measure. But there's this authorization bill, and like, it's huge, it's sweeping. It's like, think of Moby Dick. Like, this is a whale that's eating smaller whales, that's eating boats. Like, it's just consuming everything in front of it, which is how, pardon my French, but this is how you have so much fuckery with the NDAA, because it's the talks go in secret, and if it has to pass, otherwise the military, I guess, technically stops. So because it has to pass, you have everyone kind of getting their one little pet project earmark, and then they're going to hold their nose and vote for the rest of it, which, like, basically every lawmaker hates like 70 or 80% of that bill, but they're voting for it because of that small portion that they got in that they can show to their voters back home. And this is how we have the military industrial complex that every Congress just keeps boosting and, extending. And so that's where, because the UAPDA, Schumer and Round's bill, is connected with the NDAA, it kind of feels like this issue is never going to go away. And it feels like every time they do those, even though they're closed door NDAA negotiations, it feels like just having that bill out there from Schumer and Rounds, other people on Armed Services and the Senate Intelligence Committee and House as well, they're slowly getting informed on that measure. And so it seems like each year they're getting like a little portion of it included, a little portion of it included. Um, and so we'll see, especially with this administration, opening up, trying to open up the Epstein files and failing initially, but then opening up some of the JFK stuff. Like, it seems like the bent is towards more, not disclosure. I don't want to lead anyone astray. Just a little more transparency, which honestly is because of all you. If you're watching this, it's likely because you put pressure on your lawmakers that it's Congress. They take decades and decades to do what the rest of us are like, that's an emergency now. And so, yeah, everyone needs a little patience, but then also keep the pressure up, because I am very intrigued. And it seems like with Grush working in the background, even though there hasn't been a ton of like fireworks or much to focus on in this Congress when it comes to UAPs, it feels like behind the scenes it's heating up. And yeah, that's where I'm very curious.
I mean, that's good to hear that it's heating up. And, I think people are always looking forward to maybe new hearings as well. But when I look back at the last hearing, which I believe was November of 2024, where we had Lou Elizondo, Admiral Tim Gallaudet, Michael Schellenberger, and Mike Gold, former NASA employee, seemed to then be overshadowed in January when Jeremy Corbell stepped forward and said that after giving Nancy Mason, the committee, or whoever, this Immaculate Constellation document, and then Mace attributing it to Schellenberger in the hearing, Corbell then losing his mind and losing a lot of trust in Nancy Mason, maybe the Congress as a whole. How does that set us up for future hearings? That just seems that there was something going on, let's say fuckery in your words.
Isn't that a great term?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, well, because it kind of like gives the person out. It's like, I don't know if like what the intention was, but so it allows them to be a little bit of an idiot, a little bit of a dunce, which may be giving Congress a little too much credit, because it seems like there's a lot of like overt fuckery going on. But this is one of those cases where we just, so we know a lot of lawmakers, most lawmakers, they just don't know much to anything about this issue, because the public has been clamoring for this and getting louder in the past couple years, especially. But yeah. Well, especially since Grush, like Grush, when he dropped on Congress's lap these allegations in the start of 2023, like, they were serious. And that's actually, to go full circle, that's what the Democratic head of HIPSCI, the ranking member, Jim Himes, that's what he was saying. He's like, Grush made some serious allegations. So he's like, of course I know about it. I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me that last year? And so, like, I expect Congress to fumble a lot. And this one, maybe to mix metaphors to real football abroad, like this kind of feels like an ungoal. Like for Mace and her staff to just like fuck up to the point of offending folks in this community who like should be their allies. And you can kind of tell like she didn't do it intentionally. From what I know, it just seems like, and actually this has been interesting. Everyone keep an eye on Mace because she's rumored to be running for governor in South Carolina. So I think in the last Congress, you know, she's more moderate and leadership. So she's more moderate. Well, they really need her vote, you know, uh, even after she joined Burchett and the other Gates gang of eight to oust former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. So, like, she walks this interesting tightrope, but like, she's her own woman and like, first female to ever graduate from the Citadel. Like, talk with her at your own risk. That said, now that she's seemingly running for governor in South Carolina, she's felt a little more hands off on UAPs. I've been giving her some space, but it felt like leadership kind of trusted her to do the hearing in the last Congress. And she's again now on the Secrets Committee. But I feel like she's trying to distance herself from the issue a little bit in the wake of that hearing. And this is where, like, you know, I know some of her staffers, but like a lot of people in the UAP community riffed on her because her staff like unleashed T-shirts, you know, like UFO T-shirts around the hearing. And so, like, I feel like there's something there that her staff and her personally felt a little burned. So I'm curious if whether she's focused on the governorship, the gubernatorial race, or maybe she hired a new consultant in DC who's like, hey, distance yourself from that issue, even though, hey, this issue is really fucking popular with the people. And so, yeah, Washington consultants are going to say that. And so I'm curious, like, it could have been the T-shirt backlash. It could have been the backlash from the community shitting on her, pardon my French, for this Corbell stuff. But that's where you have lawmakers, like Jim Himes, again. He was like, oh, this community, UFO community. He's like, they're all up in my DMs. So, like, you all do, and I would actually add, like, maybe don't curse so much at Himes and the others, because they are listening. I mean, granted, they are bastards, but they're listening. And I would say this, the less you swear at them, the easier it is for me to get a live listening session, you know, with Himes so he can like answer your questions directly. Because like they're listening, and that's where I'm curious this Congress to see, and I haven't seen it quite yet. Well, no, we saw it with the David Grush hiring. You know, at Askapol, we broke that news. When I asked that question, I had no idea that was going to be the response. Oh, Grush is coming aboard on April 1st. What? And so that really stuck out to me because this Congress, I would ask them questions about Barber, you know, the new whistleblower. I'd ask questions about UAPD. And every lawmaker would kind of look at me like, I'm the alien. Like, what are you? Like, why are you talking about this? That does kind of make sense because we have this new administration who, you know, Elon Musk there on stage at CPAC where I was, you know, this big conservative conference with that huge chainsaw. So, like, yeah, Trump's like a master communicator. Love or hate the guy, since he came down that elevator in end of 2015, the 2016 election, like since he came down that elevator, We're all talking about him. American politics now revolves around him, for better and for worse. And so, yeah, I I get it. Why Democrats and even Republicans, as they scramble to try to pass his budget, his energy policy, as they try to codify all these cuts that Doge and Elon Musk, Department of Government Efficiency, all the cuts they're doing in the administration, they keep getting batted down by the courts. So now they need Congress, Republican Congress, to go and pass laws that back up those cuts. And they have a short window to do it because the midterms are right around the corner. So, I get it, Congress. I get it. Y'all have been slammed. You are trying to deal with this. Like a lot of your constituents, even conservatives, a lot of your constituents are really pissed off. And so I think probably after we're about to have a 2 week, because even though this Congress hasn't done much, they're about to give themselves a 2 week vacation starting April 14th for Easter or whatever. I think around then, because we'll know more about the budget, we'll see whether that's going up or down. But I think after that, you're going to have a lot of lawmakers just longing for any issue that's nonpartisan. Because, it's disgusting, but the campaign ads are already coming out. Like, we've already started the 2026 election, which I'll take a point of personal privilege as a professor. Don't allow the election to start yet. Demand that the lawmakers we all just voted in do their fucking jobs. So, if we allow them just to run, no, they'll run eternally. Make them work. We just gave them 2 more years to work for us. Demand that they work for us. And then, maybe at the start of this next year, y'all can start focusing on the midterms. But, it's disgusting. 2 former senators, this is a New Yorker piece by J.I. Packer, I believe, but this author Packer for the New Yorker back in 2010, a profile of the U.S. Senate called The Empty Chamber. In that piece, he gets 2, at the time, sitting U.S. senators, Chris Dodd, Democrat from Connecticut, and Lamar Alexander, Republican from Tennessee. He gets 2 sitting U.S. senators to admit that 75% of their job as a United States Senator is dialing for dollars and focusing on their reelection. Fuck that. Literally, fuck that. We have to demand that be flipped on its head. If you're going to, maybe we'll give you 25% of time focused on that, but you have to do that on your own goddamn time because you're on taxpayer dollars now. And so, again, this is kind of the beauty of Ask a Poll. When you all send me questions, lawmakers, they roll their eyes at me. I'm a swamp creature. They listen to you. And so make your voices heard, as you're good at doing.
Yes, absolutely. There we go. I mean, it's going to be interesting then. Let's hope that after this 2 week break that they start picking up the pace once again. And I'm sure you'll be there front and center to kind of report on it. So before I let you go, please tell everyone where they can go and follow you and your work and how to support you.
Yo, appreciate you all. Find us on askapoll.com. For you all, go to askapoll.uaps.com. We're also on X and the other sites. We're actually now on YouTube, which isn't totally public because we're still trying to perfect our videos without all you watching. But you can find us on YouTube now. But yeah, Ask a Poll. The gist is ask a politician. And so we're only as powerful as you. So send us your questions and then you literally get to hear me just ask your question to your U.S. senators or your members of Congress. And again, I'm powerless. I'm the MSM, I'm the hated media. You all are the voters. There's a power that you innately have that I just don't. And it's beautiful.
There we go. Matt, brother, it's always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining me.
Dude, thank you. Anytime.